Hi class, today we're going to talk about the distributive property. So distributive property is just another property that tells us certain things we have to do when we're dealing with expressions or equations. We've talked about equations for the last two sections, but now we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of an expression. And remember, the only difference between an expression and equation is that an equation has an equal sign. It's the only difference, is that an equation has an equal sign. So it might look something like this. So an expression would look like x plus 3, and an equation would look x plus 3 equals 5. So the only thing that's changed is that there's an equal sign. So today, when we're talking about the distributive property and when you do your homework that goes along with this video, we're going to be looking into more of expressions, and you'll see that when you look at the homework. But just to talk about the distributive property, the key to understand with distributive property is to pass out evenly is a simple way to think about that. So think about like Halloween when you were in elementary school. If you brought in Halloween candy, or if you brought in candy or a treat for your birthday, you had to distribute that candy to everybody in the class evenly, correct? So if you had cupcakes, everybody got a cupcake. That's basically what this property is telling us to do, but in math terms. So it's whatever you have on the outside of a parentheses has to be distributed or passed out evenly to everything inside the parentheses. And when I do an example, it'll make a lot more sense. So for example, I might have 2 parenthesis x plus 1. So this would be an expression. Why? Because there's no equal sign, and we're just talking about the values inside this expression. So we want to use the distributive property. Anytime you have a value on the outside of a parentheses, you're going to be using this property. And we have to pass out evenly whatever's on the inside to whatever's on the outside to the inside. So we demonstrate that by drawing arrows. And this is something I know you guys are going to say, oh, I don't want to do that, Miss Wilcox. Just extra work. I really want you to practice drawing your arrows because it'll make sure you don't forget anything. So whatever's on the outside, I have to distribute to the inside. And this little arrow is just saying that I'm multiplying. So I'm going to multiply whatever's on the outside by whatever's on the inside. So 2 times x gives me 2x. Remember, 2 and x are not the same, so we can't combine them. So it's not just 2 plus x, or 2x, sorry, 2 times x. Then we take and we go 2 to the next value, which is 1. So 2 times 1, because we're multiplying. 2 times 1 gives me 2. So I drag down the operation I had, because it's still positive. And 2 times 1 is 2. So 2x plus 2 is this expression using the distributive property. And I know that's probably a lot to look at. We're going to do another example just to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing. So I might have now change the number on the outside, 3. And maybe we'll have the number first, 2 minus x. So we still have an expression. We have a value on the outside of a parentheses and a value on the inside of a parentheses. So we have to distribute it or pass it out evenly to whatever is on the inside. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. I bring down my operation, and then 3 times x gives me 3x. So that's my final answer right there. 6 minus 3x. That's it. So you just saw 2 examples when we had a positive number on the outside. Now I'm going to show you how we distribute a negative number. Nothing changes except for we have to make sure we're watching for our negatives. So we might have negative 2 on the outside of our parentheses, and then x plus 4. So now it looks similar to what we did before, but we have a negative out here, so we have to distribute a negative inside. So negative 2 times x becomes negative 2x. I bring down my addition. negative 2 times a positive 4. Remember, negative times a positive becomes a negative. And 2 times 4 is 8. So nothing's changed with how we do the distributive property. We just have to focus on making sure we distribute the negative as well. So my final answer would be negative 2x plus negative 8. And we'll do one more example like that just to make sure we're not getting confused. And there's something that we're going to show you with this next example, just to make sure we're not confusing ourselves. So I might have a negative 3 this time on the outside, and I have x minus 1. So this is going to be a little tricky, so pay close attention. So negative 3 times x, same as before, it becomes negative 3x. And like I told you before, you normally bring down this operation. But what happens when we take a negative times a negative number? Because that one's negative, right? So negative 3 times negative 1 actually becomes a positive number, or a positive 3. Because if we were to keep it like that, it might look like this. Negative 3x minus a negative 3. Well, we can never have two negatives next to each other. And if you do, you can think of it like this. If there's two negatives next to each other, we can make it one big positive sign. So either way you do it, either you understand there's a negative times a negative becomes a positive, or if you have two negatives next to each other like I had, we brought down the subtraction symbol, and then negative 3 times 1 would be negative 3. Those two symbols together become one big positive sign. So our final answer would be negative 3x plus 3. For the examples for your homework that go along with the distributive property, all of your answers will be in expressions. We're not yet to the part where we're going to solve for x when we deal with the distributive property. We're just working on the distributive property. And remember that to pass out evenly. So anything on the outside of my parentheses, I have to put on the inside using multiplication. I'll put that over here. Just remember, using multiplication, because that's the key. You're only ever going to distribute using multiplication. No other operation. Okay? So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but that's the end of our video. Thank you very much.